I am the luckiest person on the planet. And you can tell that I am very passionate about this, and I am so very lucky because I get to help mind the gap. And the way that I get to do this in my daily walk is that I get to be part of this cycle for students. I get to train teachers, and I bring the latest and greatest information to them. And then not only do I just give them that information, it's my job then and my pleasure to go into their classrooms, and I get to see them shine, and I get to see students take off because of this latest research. In my personal life, I am an avid international traveler, and one of the places that I love to go is Great Britain. And if you've ever been to Great Britain, you've seen this everywhere. Mind the gap. It's there as you step off of the underground tube onto the platform. It's there as you step off of the buses onto very busy city streets. And it is there to remind us that something very valuable can be lost in that gap if you're not very, very careful. So in my daily life, I have come to know that there's a great gap in research and what shows up in classrooms. And this gap has been theorized by many people. I've had some urban legend statements that I've heard floating around for a long time, and one of them is that there is a knowing-doing gap. Teachers know it, they just don't do it. Another urban legend is that, teachers just don't read, so they don't know what's out there. Another urban legend, even funnier, is that teachers just love to do their own very favorite things, and so it doesn't matter what the research says, they're just going to do that. I'm here to tell you that's absolutely false. We need to put the sticks away and quit beating up teachers. That's not the case. There are 3 reasons that there's a gap between research and what shows up in classrooms. The first one is reading wars. Now let me tell you, this tablet shows us that for nearly 50 centuries, as human beings, we've been trying to put messages onto parchment or a paper or a tablet to give a message. For nearly 2,000 years, we have been working to be able to understand an alphabetic system. Now, you would think that by now, in 2016, we would have this down to a science, but that's not the case. And one of the reasons for that is reading wars. We have had in our country factions that are almost with religious fervor sure that their way is the only way to teach children to read. And the pendulum has swung for teachers of where they're supposed to be following, from one side to the other and back and forth. It is a wild swing, and it's a wide swing for them. How in the world are they supposed to know what's right and which religious fervor should they be listening to? Another reason is ivory towers. This is an absolutely beautiful university library. And the minute that teachers graduate, though, they lose access to the information in these libraries. If they can get access, it's not as much as they had while they were at the university. And the reason that they need this access is because research in education, and reading specifically, is done across many disciplines. And it's done in criminal justice studies. There is research for reading that's done in psychology, and then the health fields and education. It is all over the map. Well, where does this get published? It gets published in pretty obscure journals. These aren't journals that show up in teacher mailboxes. They don't show up in schools. They stay in these ivory towers that are not accessible to teachers. Another reason is if we look at the amount of research that's done across all of those fields, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Now, I don't know if you know a teacher, and I know a whole lot of them, and I've been one, and they spend 12 to 14 hours plus a day on their craft. Do they have time to find the needle in this haystack? I tell you that they don't. That's where I come in. As an academic coach, Chandler Unified School District has made the commitment to have district-level coaches that spend time looking at the research. We look at what is scientific and what do students need to know to be able to learn. And then we put that in the hands of teachers. So all those urban legends that I told you about, they are just urban legends. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Maya Angelou. And she tells us when we know better, we do better. And I can attest to you that that's what happens with teachers. When they know, they do. And children get that spark and they learn. Now, one of the things that I get to do is teach a class called Teaching Reading Effectively. It's one of my great joys. And you can see here, this is the human brain, and it's the left hemisphere of the brain. The brain is not wired to read. The brain is naturally wired for spoken language. Over time, it has learned how to read, and all of these circles that are on this left hemisphere of the brain are areas that must learn to work together for anyone to be able to read. Now, is it any wonder why there are so many glitches and issues in learning to read? Those circles tell the story. I also get to bring to teachers what the impact is of research-based instruction. And I love that we now can get pictures of the brain through fMRIs. fMRIs will look at what's lighting up and where is the activity in the brain. Now you can see here, on the left is student 1, and on the right is student 2. The very top row for both of those students shows the brain before they have treatment. We can see that they're struggling because there's a lot of activity happening on the right hemisphere in the brain when they're trying to read. It needs to be happening on the left side, like where you saw all of those circles. Now here's the exciting part. The bottom row for both of those students is after treatment. And that treatment is research-based instruction. You can see that there's decreased activity in the right hemisphere, which is what we want. That's a huge celebration. But look at this, it's astounding. Increased activity in the left hemisphere. This is a reading brain. So teachers have the ability to change brain structure and how it works more than a neurosurgeon does. And their answer to me is always, can you get that word out? Because we should be paid like a brain surgeon, right? And if I ruled the world, absolutely, yes, they would be. Now, that pendulum I told you that swings back and forth widely and wildly, it needs to stop. It needs to be in the middle, because each of those camps that have been fighting over time, they have great things, and they're right. But they're not all right. And the research and the science is what drives us and should be the reasons for our decisions. Now picture this track, 8 lanes, starting blocks ready to go. This is the first day of kindergarten. And kindergartners show up ready to run. And if you ask them, what are you going to learn? They always say, I'm going to learn to read. Now, unfortunately, this is the view that many of our children have in their lanes. Hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. Already, the first day of school, they're behind. Now, we can do something about this, and that's the exciting part and why I'm so very passionate. Now, you have some with hurdles. You have some that didn't have hurdles in their lanes, and they are running at breakneck speed. And you've got your others that had a few hurdles maybe, but they're running nicely. Now, the teacher is so fractured, trying to be on this end, knocking down hurdles, and they're not the same, and it's many children's hurdles, and they're keeping the ones in the middle going, and the ones on the other end, they can start to lose motivation and not run so hard because I already know this. And so the teacher's going this way, both sides, trying to keep things going in the classroom. Now, teachers can't do it alone. Children showing up to school on the first day of school already behind is not a teacher's fault. That is a community issue. That's everyone in this room and everyone that listens to this talk. It is our business to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's my call for all hands on deck. It's going to take every human being that loves someone, knows a child, and cares about our economy and the future of our country to take care of this issue. There was a study done by Hart and Risley, and it was nearly 20 years ago, but it is still so impactful. And what they did is they looked at language usage in homes. Language, vocabulary, and the use of language and playing with words is what we're looking for. The first 2 columns you can see are the amounts of vocabulary that parents have, the amounts of vocabulary that children have. Now you can see the different colors represent different socioeconomic groups. And I don't want you to get lost in this is an issue of the poor or those people, because I will say to you, since this study was done nearly 20 years ago, the lines have been blurred And this is an all-people problem these days. So let's not get lost in the them, because this is an us issue. The last two columns talk about how much language is happening in a 1-hour time frame. Now here's what I find interesting about this study. The first arrow here shows that a 3-year-old from a professional home has more vocabulary at their use than a parent in a welfare home. The next thing I find interesting is that a 3-year-old in a professional home speaks more in a 1-hour time frame than a parent from a welfare home. This is why children show up on the first day of school already behind. There's language impoverishment. Hart and Risley then said, so if that's what we know about 3-year-olds, what do we know about 4-year-olds? Because 4-year-olds start showing up at preschool ready to go. What they found with a 4-year-old is there is already, for some children, a 30 million word gap. That's astounding, right? That's absolutely unacceptable. And that equates to hurdles and hurdles and hurdles in lanes. Now, the gap caused by research and what shows up in classrooms, here's a great example for you. Teachers have been told about this Hart and Risley study and they've read it, but the suggestion that always follows in teacher journals is this: make sure that you work on vocabulary. Yes, I agree. They got it right. The next suggestion is, what you really need to do is you need to pick one word a day, celebrate that word, and anytime anybody uses it, they get a little prize. To that I say, nice try. One word a day does not close a 30 million word gap. In fact, those that had language, the gap is even widening because they're taking off and their language is growing exponentially. One word a day does not cut it, and giving that information to teachers has not been helpful. So Hart and Risley also looked at the type of language that children hear in homes. And what they found is prohibitions versus affirmations make a difference. Now, affirmations, we all know what those are, things that continue language, ask for more of a story, ask for details, they're colorful words, they keep conversation happening. Prohibitions, the best way I can describe them, is that they are simple, goal-oriented demands. Now, you can see that the welfare homes and the middle-class homes have more prohibitions going on than in the professional homes. Now, why is this? Think about stress. Think about trying to pay your bills. Think about not having enough food. Thinking about not getting enough rest and working multiple jobs. What kind of conversation do you have? You're probably not encouraging a lot of really flowery stories and looking for details. You're going to be quick and to the point because stress happens, and that's what happens with all of us. Now, our economy is making that, as I said, the lines are blurred. It's happening everywhere. So about 20 years after this study, it's still valid, and it's not a poverty issue. It's not a genetics issue. These children were not born less than anyone else, and every parent in these studies was reported to love and cherish their children. So it's not about that either. It's about actual intention and being sure to make sure that children have the language that they need. This is what's blurring the lines. In 2016, we are absolutely enamored with our screen time. We love our tablets and we love our cell phones. And you've all been somewhere where you thought, I wish they'd just pay attention to that child. Well, guess what? Sometimes it's all of us. So we have to make sure that children are getting the language and the discussion that they need. So language impoverishment is not just about socioeconomic status. It can be an issue for each of us. I, in my own home, fight this. Am I making sure to give the time and the language that I need to children in my own home? Now, Read On Chandler is a local entity, so you're probably saying, what do I do about this? You've got me. Well, Read On Chandler has signed up to say, we will make sure that children show up in those lanes ready to run without hurdles. They've partnered with the Chandler Unified School District. There are other entities in our community, and they have said, let's do something. They have found that up to 70% of children in a 5-year time frame are going to show up to school already behind. That's unacceptable to me, and I hope that it's unacceptable to you. So what do we do about it? Well, the way that this readiness is measured is phonological awareness. Now, phonological awareness looks at language. It looks at the sounds of language. Can you manipulate sounds in a word? And all of the hearing piece of language. How do you do this? It's free is the good news, and every single person in this room can do this and impact children everywhere. Nursery rhymes are a big one. We need to have poems. Reading stories to children with beautiful language takes care of that. Language play and songs. Now, in my home, I was fortunate. My great-grandmother, born in 1900, had a family rhyme from grandmothers above her, and she taught us Joanie Katoni, Tianical Phony, T-legged, tie-legged, bow-legged Joanie. I can do that with every name in here. Miranda Katanda, Tianical Fanda, T-legged, tie-legged, bow-legged Miranda. That's playing with sounds and playing with language. It's free, but it makes sure children show up ready to learn to read. So researchers have shown with a crystal ball that how you are in kindergarten when you show up the first day of school, are you ready or not, impacts your performance in third grade. Now, even more impactful and sobering, I think, is that third grade performance predicts whether you're going to graduate from high school or not. So I can make the leap that if I show up to kindergarten the first day of school already behind, I'm in danger of not graduating. That's an unacceptable issue, and as a community, we cannot let that be. So 95% of children we know from research can learn to read and read well. This is the cycle that we want to have happening. We want children to be successful in school so that they're better earners, so that they don't have all of those stressors, so language in their homes is rich and beautiful and that there's a lot of it. And this can be a generational cycle, and this is what I'm advocating for, because this cycle can also be the opposite, and that's not pretty. This is what we want. So Ben Franklin talks about an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And Maya Angelou says when we know better, we do better. So as a community, let's ensure that every child shows up ready to go. Now, as I step out into my daily walk each day onto the platform of my life, I am mindful about minding the gap. I hope that you join me and are ever mindful as together and as a community we mind the gap. Thank you.